Hi guys! Ava and I have had a wonderful couple of weeks here in Chichester, making a bunch of new trim for the interior of the boat and also these spiffy new companionway doors. But it is time for us to vamoose back to Gosport. If you're new to our channel, my name is Mads and this is my fiancée Ava. I've spent the last 5 years doing a somewhat extensive refit on my 1987 Warrior 38 named Athena. That involved all kinds of fun stuff like building a new rudder using vacuum infusion, gutting most of the interior to make structural repairs, and then subsequently rebuilding most of the interior. I also rebuilt the entire deck and painted the top sides. All of that fun is documented in hundreds of videos here on YouTube. One of the interesting things about Chichester, at least from a Dane's perspective, is that the marina has its very own lock. It has that because of the tidal range in this area. Now, of course, I come from a part of the world that has the tidal range of a dry sponge, so this is all very exciting to me. Now, today, high water is supposed to be around 4 o'clock. To figure out when high water is, we could either use tidal charts on paper. I went on a course about 5 years ago to learn that skill, have not used it since. It's a little bit of a time-consuming, fiddly process, but yeah, it's a lot easier just to use apps. The information is also already baked into our chart plotters, but for checking the tides real quick on your phone, I like this Tides app. But if you're staying in one of the premier marinas, they have a really nice app. Like for instance here in Chichester, you can see when the lock has what's called free flow. Free flow means that the lock is simply just open and you can pass straight through without using the elevator function of it. But today there are no free flows, so we're going to get the full experience.
Head down the fairway, I'll get the gates open for you as soon as the bridge is clear. I'll get if you just enter on a green light, please.
That is perfect. Thank you so much. We are underway. So far, so good. There was a little bit of a mix-up. We were so focused on getting good drone footage when we were leaving Chichester that we kind of forgot to put our fenders in, which is, of course, traditionally Ava's responsibility. We're coming up on Itchener down there, so these must be some of the 5,000 moorings that are in this area. And Ava's doing a great job of not hitting any of them. We have about another 5 nautical miles to go until we're out of the shallow bit here. Then we can run the water maker on the small stretch here up to Gosport. In the video where we were heading down to Chichester from Gosport, I saw a few comments asking why we don't put up sail. Well, first of all, that day, just as today, there was no wind, so putting up the sails doesn't really make a lot of sense. And also, we're just trying to get in before it gets dark, which it gets dark pretty early around here at this time of year. It's only a very short trip, 3 hours from Chichester to Gosport, and I've got my super handy autopilot back there at the helm, so yeah, this should be a breeze. On the trip up to Chichester, we ran the water maker for about an hour or so, and figuring that things don't just like to sit, they like to be used, we better run it again. Last time I ran the water maker, I used this hydro testing doohickey here, but I had it in the wrong mode, so why don't we try again with the thing in the right mode. The water quality LED on the control panel is green, so this is just more for the fun of it. We're sitting at 260 parts per million. And the water tastes great. Oh, let's go ahead and put it into the tank. It is a little bit swelly out here today, not too bad, but we're coming up on the fort up there. That marks our right turn, Clyde, into Portsmouth and Gosport. We have some smaller DIY projects on our list for this week. Ava's going to be insulating a bunch in the forward cabin. I want to varnish the settee table. I also want to install this little barrel bolt here on our new companionway doors so we no longer have to use tape. And I'm also going to be installing a new AIS transceiver. Let's jump right in and get started varnishing the table. That's going to take a few days, so we better get started. I've cheated a little bit and already filled a little hole that was here on the table with some unthickened epoxy. There was a 4 or 5 millimeter deep gouge in the tabletop when we got it here, and I figured the best solution to that was just to fill it with a little bit of epoxy. I'll just sand the epoxy nice and flush with the surface. Once this is varnished, we should hardly be able to see it. Here is what our little repair looks like now. Next up, let's just get all of this wiped down so the surface is prepped. To wipe down and degrease the surface, I used the same thinner number 1, that I'm going to be thinning the first coat with at around 30%. My favorite coat of varnish is always the first one. It just goes on so easy and you get to see the dark color of the wood. I absolutely love our new companionway doors, but up until now we've been relying on tape to keep them closed because if there's nothing holding the doors, well, then they will open. I finally got my hands on a 10mm Forstner bit that'll work well with this barrel bolt, so let's go ahead and fix that issue. And now for the big test. Perfect. We've got about an 8mm gap along the sides of the door, and just to keep the wind at bay, I've ordered some weather stripping off of Amazon. Up until now, we've been using a couple of blankets over the companionway to keep the heat in, so this is certainly going to be a lot easier. This stuff might be a little bit on the thick side, but let's just see if it works. That is going to be a very nice, squishy, airtight seal. The weather stripping does put a tiny bit of pressure on the doors, but that just means they're not going to be rattling. Now the astute will note that we, as of right now, do not have a way of locking the doors from the outside. I've got this little cylinder that I could use, but it's not going to be super elegant because the back of it is going to be protruding into the cabin. So yeah, I'll see if I can find a slightly better solution for next week's video.
Deja vu, here I am back at it again, re-insulating the forward cabin lockers. I did it before a few months ago, but as it's getting colder out, we soon realized that the amount we put in was not enough. All these lockers have 10mm of insulation. When Mads insulated Obelix, he used 12mm, except when we were ordering this, we couldn't find 12mm, we could only find 10mm insulation, and we thought, 2mm, that's not going to make that big of a difference. Oh, silly Ava and Mads, how wrong we were. As it got colder, we were finding more and more condensation in these lockers, and they get pretty packed with clothing, mostly Mads' clothing, but we think it's a combination of the clothes sitting up against the insulation and the fact that there's 2 of us living on the boat now. Apparently, I breathe way too heavily. So this time we are coming back with a vengeance with this big daddy right here. That is 19mm insulation, and we are putting that on top of the 10mm insulation that's already in there. So yes, that is 29mm of insulation, and if that doesn't work, then I don't know what will. However, in what seems like our never-ending quest to keep condensation at bay, there have been a few things that have been working really well throughout this winter. For instance, in the V-berth here under our mattress, we added this gray mat. They're actually just camping mats that we taped together and then fit to size the V-berth. So we have the camping mat, and then we have this meshy stuff, and that has helped to keep things very dry this winter.
I've been living aboard sailboats for 8 years now, I think, and aboard my old boat, Obelix, the reflex stove did a great job of keeping humidity down. Here aboard Athena, we do need a little bit of help from a dehumidifier. The higher the humidity here inside of the boat, the higher the potential for condensation. And I think most people will also agree that a relative humidity around 50 to 60% is just more comfortable. When it comes to dehumidifiers you plug into the wall, there are basically 3 types, I think. There are the Peltier-based ones, which are cheap and to be avoided at all costs. Then there are the compressor-based ones, which are good, and then there are the desiccant ones, which are also good. Over the last 8 years, I've had 4 different dehumidifiers, 2 compressor-based ones and 2 desiccant-based ones. This, the latest one, is a desiccant-based one. My first 2 dehumidifiers, one compressor-based and one desiccant-based, died because of all the dust I was generating here aboard Athena. They worked flawlessly, just besides dying from the dust, and I don't really think I can fault them for that. There are pros and cons to both a compressor-based and a desiccant-based dehumidifier. From my understanding, the compressor-based ones are slightly more energy efficient, but the desiccant ones will work better at lower temperatures, which is why we got this one, because generally when we're sleeping we like the temperature to be around 15 degrees, and a compressor-based dehumidifier will start to ice over at that temperature. At least that's been my experience with the models I've had, and certainly when we switched to this desiccant one from a compressor-based one, there was way more water in the little container in the morning, so I think it's fair to say this thing pulls out more moisture from the air at colder temperatures than the compressor-based model we had. Through the magic of video editing, Ava is done insulating our lockers in here, and we've shoved all of our clothing back in. This is my side, plenty of room in there left over. This is Ava's side, causing us to slightly tilt to starboard. This is the stuff Ava used. This is Armorflex 19mm. This is the AF version, which is the top of the line model. It's got the microband stuff in it to prevent mold and bacteria stuff, and I don't know if that works, but yeah, this is the stuff we used. A while back, em-trak sent us one of their AIS transceivers. This is the B954. We already have a Garmin AIS 800, which is also a Class B SO or self-organizing AIS transceiver. But in my opinion, AIS is one of the most important features you can add to your boat, so having a backup unit is not a bad thing. The B954 has at least one feature that the AIS 800 from Garmin doesn't have, and that is Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. With this, that means we can connect our phone or our tablet, and then we can get AIS information on, for instance, apps like Navionics. The missing Wi-Fi and Bluetooth from the AIS 800 is in no way a deal breaker. It's still a good little unit, and we use it with both of our chart plotters, and it's been absolutely flawless. But whenever I go down for a nap and Ava's up at the helm, every once in a while I like to check Navionics just to see what's around us. And it would be really cool to be able to see AIS targets on there as well. Of course, having that feature also means that we can use our phone or our tablet as a bit of a backup chart plotter in case the one up in the cockpit for whatever reason stops working. So yeah, I think it's a nice feature that I'm excited to play with. As you can clearly see here on the box, this is a Class B 5W/SO transceiver. That's also sometimes referred to as Class B+. The older version of the Class B standard is called SC. With the SO or the Plus, you do get a few benefits. Like for instance, in case your boat is a really fast moving boat, say it goes more than 14 knots, then you get a more frequent position updating. But for us, that's not really going to be that important. We're never going to see 14 knots. With Class B+, you also get a slightly higher output of 5 watts versus I believe it's 2 watts with the old Class B standard. In terms of range, the old standard would be something around 6-7 nautical miles, whereas the new one's probably going to be up to about 11 nautical miles. I think for me the biggest reason to upgrade is if you sail in highly congested waters. With a Class B Plus transceiver, you have a better chance of being seen. That's kind of the super short version of it. There are some more differences between the old and the new Class B standards, but yeah, let's not go into too much detail. Having said that, when I was reading the technical specs for this guy, I noticed something kind of interesting, at least for me. It turns out this little guy, even though he is only a Class B Plus transceiver, he can send out an AIS message 27. Now AIS message 27 is a message specifically designed for use with satellites. Message 27 is a smaller data package than the normal AIS messages, and I'm assuming that's because of the further distance up to yonder satellites. I did find some other interesting little tidbits, like for instance, message 27 is not supposed to be sent if you've seen message 4 within the last number of minutes or whatever. Message 4 is a message you get from base station, so if you're near shore, you're not really supposed to send AIS message 27. I'm assuming that's to avoid congestion. Some of the documentation I found online was rather old, from 2009. That mentioned that AIS message 27 should not be included in anything but AIS Class A to avoid congestion, yet now it's found its way into this little Class B Plus transceiver, which is very exciting because this means that you can do a bit of fleet tracking even when you're far offshore without something like an inReach or an Iridium Go. I look forward to testing this on our upcoming Atlantic crossing in December of 2022, but yeah, for now let's just get the little guy installed. The transceiver comes with an optional GPS antenna. We're gonna try to install him without that to start with. It should be fine, but in case we need it, it is hiding somewhere in the aft cabin. Included was a little mounting bracket, a template for lining up that bracket, and some screws, and a power and data cable, but this is all old standard NMEA. Of course, there is also NMEA 2000. I've installed the B954 in here in our little technical area right below the Garmin AIS 800. The wiring is still a little bit of a mess, so please excuse that. All I have to do now is to enter our MMSI number into the Pro AIS software, which is the same software I've used across all of the different models of AIS transceivers I've had over the years. I don't know if any manufacturer uses any other software than this. I swear, this software looks identical to when I first used it in 2011. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It works great and yeah, it does what it's supposed to do. I guess it has changed a little bit. Down here is an option to enable that message 27 I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, the diagnostic page in Pro AIS does confirm that we do have an issue with our VHF antenna. This has nothing to do with the AIS transceiver. It is an issue with either the cable or the antenna. I joined the Wi-Fi network created by the AIS transceiver, and now we have AIS information inside of Navionics. That's pretty cool. em-trak provides this app where you can see a bunch of AIS information. You can also see the diagnostics tab, and again there it confirms we do have an issue with our VHF antenna. I think the chat plotters or Navionics does a better job of telling you where these boats are relative to you, but still, this is nice information to have. And in here we can also enable silent mode. That simply just means that we're still receiving AIS information, but we're not transmitting, which is really nice when you're, for instance, in a marina like here where you don't want to contribute to the congestion. It's a few days later, and besides having finished varnishing the settee table, which looks really nice, it is also my birthday today. Or that is to say, by the time you guys see this, it'll be a week since it was my birthday. And in fact, yesterday, by the time you guys see this, or by the day I publish it at least, Ava and I will have gotten married. Historically, I've kept these videos as close to real time as possible, but I knew I didn't want to shoot a video the week we're getting married when we were in Denmark with my parents, so hence the, little bit of cheating. Next week, if everything goes according to plan, hopefully we'll be able to unstep the mast, replace the VHF antenna and the cable to get rid of that annoying issue, also replace the cable to the camera at the top of the mast, I think that's also broken, and also replace the sheaves at the top of the mast so we can get rid of our wire rope rigging and replace that with all Dyneema rigging. Nothing is set in stone yet. We're still waiting for a final confirmation from the rigger for when he's got the crane there, but hopefully it works out. So yeah, if that doesn't work out, then we might just publish a boat tour or something like that, a little bit different, but fingers crossed. Ava and I have a bit of packing to do before we can rush off to Denmark and get married, so we better end this week's video here. But we hope to see all you guys back here aboard Athena next week for yet more DIY fun. As always, feel free to leave a comment down below, and don't forget, if you've enjoyed this video,
Please remember to leave a like.
see you!